Ryan will be here in a minute.
He doesn't want this on there.
I don't care. Hi, Bethany. So, it's a recording, so we watch it later. So let's talk about why we're here and how we can maximize our time. So if you turn to your buddy next to you and tell him why you're here, and don't do a smart aleck thing because my boss said I had to. All right? So ready, set, go.
I'm here because I watched you comment, learn how to do it if one teach the Bible. Particularly because I think that if we the leadership on this value really spending time learning something incredible.
Right. Tell me what you heard, not what you said. Hey, Ryan. Hold on. Give it to you in just a minute. They just shared why they're here. So what did you hear from somebody? Tell me what you heard. Yes. Nice. Nice. Okay.
Learn how to teach the Bible and get the wisdom from people who are not.
Okay. Good. And what'd you hear?
Learn to teach the Bible to kids.
Learn to teach the Bible to kids. Good. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of a question time who has a lot about leadership.
Okay. What'd y'all hear? Where'd you do it before?
We thought we misunderstood the question. We thought you said applying to your intern instead of applying to your
Poor question on my part there. I'll take the blame for that. What did you hear?
Well, she was talking about how she wanted kids who had never done this before to learn more about a group setting of leadership. And yeah.
Good. Well, before Ryan comes up, I just want to remind you that if 10 nice people put together a Bible lesson and we gave them all the same passages, they're all going to have 10 different lessons. And there's some of them that will be wrong. And there's some that will be right, but nobody changes. And there'll be some that are right and people change. So I just want you to be thinking about that as we're doing how to teach the Bible. Which category do you want to be in? Because on any given Sunday, there's 100 pastors. Pick a passage, and they're teaching on that passage. And if you combined them all and listen to this one, found the fruit, it's gonna be different. Trying to figure out this during this course, how and why. Okay? So Ryan, how can we serve you?
I'm ready.
You're ready.
How was the picture? Picture? Like the song?
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
I remember doing that with my first job, Ken. And she said, look at that, look at that. And I couldn't look at it. I was looking at it, and like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
So I went up to the side, I started beating the side. Come on, come on. I said, she goes, what are you doing? I said, I used to work on my TV. You know? And,
Yeah, I don't think it's too funny. Our baby just does not like pictures. And so the ultrasound tech's like slamming the ultrasound thing on her stomach. I'm like, stop, like trying to get the baby to move. Like, why are you doing this? Slamming his stomach is not gonna get him to move. Oh, okay.
Wait, Ryan. What do you think that means?
When
What you're erasing?
Peter walking on water.
No.
All right. Thanks for being gracious with me. The last ultrasound we have, there was something concerning that came up. Basically, the baby had dropped from being in the 70 percentile to the 40 in a 2-week time frame, which that drop is significant. So this one was a big one for us because if he continued to drop at that rate, he needs to be delivered pretty soon because it means something's wrong with the umbilical cord. And so we were a little anxious, but thankfully the Lord answered our prayers. His growth has increased by 4% in the past 4 weeks. So we're really very, very thankful. So that's why we were there a little longer there explaining all that. So I like ran here though. So let me pull up what we're up to today. Basically, what we're going to be doing today is we typically are going to do a one session on Bible teaching, one session on leadership. But I'm not here next week, and you guys are teaching the Bible. Most of you, I think all of you, are teaching the Bible pretty regularly. So we're going to do 2 sessions, beginning 2 sessions on Bible teaching, and then next week Bill will handle 2 sessions on leadership, and then after those 2 weeks we'll tag team leadership and Bible teaching throughout all of it. And Bill and Jamin will be in that, and so will Becky kind of jump in and whatnot. So, but what we're gonna start today is asking the question of how to study to teach the Bible. And I find this to be extremely important that many people don't see as important as the presentation of the word, but the preparation of the word is just as important as the presentation. And yet most people don't like that sentence because it's the presentation that people ooh at and ah at and at. It's the presentation that gets views on Facebook. It's the presentation that people compliment you. No one compliments you on your preparation. They only compliment you on your presentation. Yet preparation is, I would make the case, probably more valuable than your presentation. Because you can have a great presentation, but terrible preparation, and that lesson's going to be wrong. But if you have a fantastic preparation, and you might not present it well, the truth has been communicated clearly, and the Spirit is going to work in the midst of that truth. And so we want to focus on our preparation before we focus on our presentation. And so as we study, we study to prepare to really do 2 things. 1, to know the Bible, and 2, to give the Holy Spirit time to enlighten our minds. If you do not prepare well, if you don't spend the minutes, you will not know the passage, and you'll look at the Spirit. A lot of people like to tell me, like CAU, I teach in the Spirit. They don't prep; they just show up and they just go. And I'm always so sad to hear that sentence, because you look at the Spirit and say, I want you in my presentation, but not my preparation. And what a sad thing. And so that's why we study, to prepare, to know the Bible, to know the passage we're about to teach, but also to give the Spirit time to enlighten my mind. And I've come to find the more time I give him, the better the lesson turns out. Some people are scrambling to prepare a lesson the day before, or they start the day before. Like, you've just shortchanged the Spirit's desire to interact with you in your lesson plan. And so the more time you can give, the better. I appreciate what Doug does. He has a system where he prepares 4 weeks in advance, but he's working on 4 lessons consecutively. Like step 1 of a lesson he does, step 2 of a lesson he does, of the following. I won't explain. Regardless, it's pretty complex, and yet he believes this to be true. So prep is really important. But here's how, in terms of the Bible teaching capacity, here's how we're going to picture this when it comes to our study. We have the people in the passage. We have their world. Well, some people would like to say their town. I mean, you could draw little cities here, little windows, and other cities. And so you have the people of the text. It's their world. It's their town. And then, but then we have our world, right? With our buildings are a little taller, a little more busy, and we have a big question, which today I hope will provide a solution to. How in the world do we get from here, from this world, to our world? How might we show up there? How can we do it? Because if we're going to just start at our world and not give much attention to their world, we are not going to end our lesson very faithfully to the text, right? We want to focus on their world, because if we focus on their world, their world will show up more faithfully to our world, instead if we just start real at our world. Does that make sense? Um, and much of your fruit of your lesson will come from how well you've studied their world. If you want to be a faithful teacher, you have to be confident here. You have to be certain here of what's going on, what's happening. And so today we're going to build the framework of how we move from their world to our world in our study. I don't want to do this. And here's to illustrate this for you of why it's so important to spend a lot of minutes here before we try to move here. Because if we don't spend minutes here, like I said before, we won't end here faithful to the text. Just the other day, I was watching a guy. He's like one of the most up-and-coming pastors in today's time, and he was teaching the passage of Jesus spitting in the dirt and wiping on the man's eyes. And I can not promise you, I'm pretty confident he might have spent an hour here. Because he was so certain about that passage and what it meant for the people, what it meant for the people he was talking to, that his whole principle, his whole push for that passage was, you want to know why Jesus spit in the dirt? It's shocking. He says, you want to know why Jesus spit in the dirt in that man's eyes? And I'm not kidding you. He spit in his hand. And he hocked like 3 loogies in his hand. Okay? And he was probably sick the day before. And he smoothed it all together in his hands, and then he brought up a member of his body. And he wipes his spit in the guy's face, okay? And he says, let me tell you why Jesus would spit in this man's eyes. And he says, he wanted to give the man his DNA. And I'm like sitting here thinking, what is this? Like, what are you actually saying right now? And he continues to say, and I want you to know when the Lord gives you his DNA, it's going to be done. And I'm looking at this saying, in your prep work, I'm almost certain you did not spend time here. Because I don't think I think it's in Matthew. I think it's in Matthew or Mark. I look at Drew like I know I'm not. I don't think when the author wrote about that and recorded that story, he hoped that 2,000 years later, there would be a church in Texas that would find out the true meaning of that passage, that the Lord wanted to give the man his DNA. That is not the authorial intent of the author, right? And that's a big part of why we study. We want to look for the author's intent. And that was not the author's intent. That story carries a different type of principle. And so you can't say, he did not spend time here to understand what was going on in the passage. And because he did not spend time here, he then got here in an incorrect way. He was one of the, as Bill was saying, of the 100 pastors who taught that passage that week, he was wrong. Another time, I was sitting in another up-and-coming pastor's, and I'm not, these big growing churches, I'm not shooting arrows at all of them. A lot of them are really great. But another one who was talking about expectation. And I'm pretty confident he didn't sit here very long, because his principle was, he was talking about the story where Mary went to visit Elizabeth, and both of them were expecting. And his whole principle is, when you're expecting heaven and I'm expecting, and we bump into each other, exciting things happen. Right? Clever wordplay. Tickles my ears, really. Tickles my ears. But because Mary was expecting and Elizabeth was expecting, when they kind of bumped into each other, John the Baptist kind of jumped up in the belly of Elizabeth. He built his whole sermon off of that statement on expectation. And so, megachurch pastors are not bad, but they are bad. All pastors are bad when we do not spend time here, and yet we try to get here too fast. And so, my hope is after today, we would be very slow. We'd be very slow for that to happen in our own teaching.
Right, just clarification. The antecedents of there and ours. There is the students or the people we're teaching, and ours is the teacher.
Yeah, I can clarify this. Thank you. The Bible world, the people of the text. Yes.
was not a teaching that was faithful to the principle of the text. And so, again, so we're going to focus on really here a whole lot today. And there are three things when it comes to understanding, I think, the Bible world, or we'll just put their world, the people of the text, their world, their town, and these three things are what we call observations, questions, and outlines. These three things are what we hope to do in order to understand their world or the world of the people in the text. Because when I say there, we can't lump all of them into one place because the Bible was written in such a fast time frame. But the people we're studying, the way I understand what's going on in their world is through observations, questions, and outline. When I ask the question of what am I observing, this is what happens here is I read the passage. Basically, your goal is to read the passage twice, and then on the third time, you're going to begin to nail these things, where you're going to write your observations, and as you write your observations, you're going to also write questions as you're observing things. And then after you've done observations and questions, you're then going to move to develop an outline of what has happened in the passage. Now, three things that we focus on when we're doing our observations is what we call setting, event or action, and then response. That in most narratives, now we're speaking more narratives. I think most of you guys are teaching narratives, and so this is where we're focusing. We do a little bit of a different process when it comes to epistles, or I do. Okay, cool. Oh, great. That's fine. You can still sometimes do this, but setting event response, because a lot of times the epistles, Paul. Let me move this way. A lot of times there is a story behind what's happening with the people he's writing to, right? Like in 1 Corinthians, they had that guy who was sleeping with his stepmother, right? We have a setting there, we have an event, and Paul's giving them a response that they need to move with according to the event, and that they're being complacent with this guy in the church, right? So you can still find this in the epistles very easily. But in most other places in the Bible, we're looking for the setting. What is the place? What's the culture? Who are the characters, right? And then the event. What happened? Was there some action? Did someone say something that surprised everyone? It's the focus of what this character did this in this setting, and then what was the response of the people around them, of the character who did the action, you name it. And so typically most narratives and a lot of epistles can be broken down into these sections. And so this is what we look for. And a lot of times I will list these three things out on top of my observations. So setting is this, 2 men are traveling on the road to Emmaus, and Jesus steps in, right? That's a story we're familiar with. And then the event, and then the response. And so, but these aren't my only observations. I'm also recording interesting details that I'm picking up as I'm reading as well. Because a lot of the times the details will help me further on, and even just to understand the passage. Because what's included in the Bible, I'd say, is included for a reason. And if there's a small detail included, then I want to consider how does that detail provide value to this story? Because John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, they could have all left it up, but they choose to include it. So details I put down here. As well. And as I'm writing my observations, I also am writing questions, because when I'm making observations, I'm also thinking, why is this happening? And so the two places that my questions reside in is, one, what do I not understand? Is typically my first question. And my second question is, what do I think my listener will not understand? Because I might understand what Jesus meant in the bread of life discourse when he says, eat my flesh, drink my blood. I get that. I was at Bible school. I don't really need to go through that. But if I'm teaching middle schoolers, I can bet my bottom dollar that they don't know what that means. And so sometimes it's a question I don't know, but other times I'm trying to anticipate questions that they will not know as well. And I find some of the best moments are when I find answers to my own questions that I'm confused about. We have a saying in the Bible teaching program at CIU, we want to be learners first, teachers second. That we teach not for show, but out of overflow is what we kind of our mantra of the program. And so I want to ask questions that I don't get as well, because when I take the time to answer those questions, I'm the learner first. And the best teacher is the one who learned for themselves. And so we don't want to separate ourselves in our study. We want to involve ourselves in our study. Because if you never involve yourself in the study, what you will bring to the listener is this kind of like formulaic, very robotic truth production if you're not involved in it. One of the greatest methods you have in teaching the Bible is your redeemed personality. And so who God's made you, the humor you like to use, the stories you have, all of those things. Your redeemed personality is such a massive part of how you teach the Bible. And so a little rabbit trail there, but we need to involve ourselves in this process, in our study of the Word, and not separate, oh, this is for them. No, it's always for you. It's always for you. And then after questions, after I list my questions, typically I do observations and questions together. I'll basically just draw something like that, and I'll list my observations, and then, oh, that's interesting, and I'll write a question, and I'll just keep going through the passage until I finish it with all of them. And then when I find questions that I really need to answer before I move on, I then get to work and trying to seek to answer the hard questions. And then after I've done this work of observations and questions, I then develop my outline. And my outline it looks like this, you have Roman numeral, and then I'll do A, B, Roman numeral 3, A, B, C. Basically, it's the flow of the passage. I'm not trying to spiritualize it. I'm not trying to take it to our world. All it is this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Just so that I can succinctly see the passage in an outline form. But I don't think we'll practice that. In a second. So, I'll do it in bullet point or something like this if I'm working on paper. But I like bullet points because I can just have it. And after this then is the first step to what we call the three principles. But before we get to the three principles, I want us to practice these three steps in a very sound scriptural, a fantastic story that maybe many of you guys read as a small child. And so it's not in the Bible. I said all scripture. What's that? Oh, no, it's not scripture. So this is the Fox and the Crow. You guys ever read the Fox and the Crow? Yes. Josh, Fox and the Crow?
Yes,
Maybe you'll get flashbacks as you were a kid. But what the game plan is to find out, it's not the Bible world, because this is a Bible story, but it is their world. We are going to dissect and figure out the world of this story, your observations, questions, and outlines. So the game plan is just read it once without doing anything, and then go ahead and start building. Go ahead and start writing your observations and developing your questions, and we'll give some minutes to it. Yeah, on the back of it, you can write on your own notebook as well. So it'll just take a couple minutes to do that. Give another minute, and then we'll work through it together as well. Alright, I wish I could give you more time, but for the sake of time, we gotta keep moving on. But let's work through these. What are some observations? First of all, who's speaking here? That's always you always wanna ask that question. Who's talking? Yeah, the fox, good. Good, what's kind of the setting? Do we have one? Did they not give us a lot of words for it? What's the setting?
The woods.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. Good. And there's another one they gave.
Storm over the hill. We don't know about winter.
That's right. And then the weather, I think it talks about the weather. Yeah, sun, it's a good one. All right, what's the event? What's the main character? What are they trying to do? What's kind of the heart of the story? What's that? Yes. Fox is hungry. And how does he, really, that doesn't capture, that probably doesn't do it all justice. Help me here. How the fox, okay. Fox gets food by what? Yeah, flattery, right. That's the event. I'm gonna get this food by flattering the crow. That's the action of the fox. And what's the response of the crow? Yeah, it gives that, yeah. Look at, oh, I should probably say crow. Yeah. Would you guys change, alter? You guys have different things for these? Yes. Yes, yeah. And it doesn't always fit like this. Sometimes this is just an easier thing. Oh, this story makes it a little easier, so it's not as fluid, or it's a little more fluid than I can picture in the scriptures. Yes.
The setting there's two settings in the text.
Good.
Okay, yeah,
Continue.
yeah, because the two characters present are you and the fox, not the fox and the crow. But then the fox shares a story
Yes.
in the simple past tense of earlier with the crow and the fox.
Yep.
So there's kind of the near setting what the fox wants to communicate with us, and then this farther away of what the fox did with the crow that morning. Because the time is not morning. The time is actually after the morning has passed.
Yes. So this moves into a little more complexities, and you'll see this in the scripture at time too. Sometimes, Lord, we have a direct dialogue with the reader. I say listener, but I meant reader there. There's a direct dialogue from the fox and us, and then it switches as he tells the story, which is that might help us as we move through the process. But I think that's a good thing to observe, is that there's a change in narration in this story. Excuse me. And I was trying to think of a scripture where there's a change in narration.
Like a parable?
Yes, perfect. Yeah, thank you. That's a very, if you try to work through a parable in the same way you work through Jesus' explanation of a parable, it's not going to turn out very well. So yeah, great catch. What other things did you observe? What is it for the author to pick a fox? What does that connotate? Yeah, sly, mischievous, that there's deception involved, that even in his picking of the character, we see the author's intending to communicate something based off the animal he picks. Where do we see that in the scriptures? Okay, yes, where's another?
You fox.
Okay, yes, where's another? And what about in the positive sense? Yeah, okay, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. What about us? How are we referred to? Not really. Yeah, so we even see that approach in the scriptures as well. That when Jesus talks about us as sheep, that animal has something about it that's very similar to us. And so it's always good to be asking those questions as well. When people are classified with this type of illustration, what is it trying to be communicated, which we see this here. So I don't know what the crow symbolizes, but
What?
Well, I think it's a bird. I think it's like, I think
a
it's
bad
just
singer.
like a bird for the, because in the it's pretty tense of like, oh, I like chickens, they're chickens or whatever. But and then like I also like cheese, which I thought was weird when I talked about
Yes.
cheese. But that was my question.
Good.
Cheese. Anyways, but just like another bird, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
Because of the weirdness of a fox and a bird.
But think about what Bill said. A crow's a bad singer. Why would the author include a bad singing crow? What does it kind of come up? What does it make come alive in the story? Yeah. Yes, flattery. Because flattery is a whole lot more obvious when the person's not all that good at it, but you're trying to make them believe they are. Like the author's intent is to bring up a bird that's not all that good at singing, right? And so that might be an observation as well. Why is the author having a fox and not a hound or a bird and not a that would be a question of mine as I wrote. Yeah. So great. I didn't even think about the birds when he said that. All made sense. So good. Anyone else see that he actually gives the end of the story at the beginning? Which I find really interesting as an observation as well. And that he kind of, he tells you what's going to happen, and then the story happens, or it shows you how it does. So I thought that was an interesting observation.
There are stories where the fox is the good guy, but in this one, right in the first paragraph, he's the bad guy.
Yes.
He hasn't even got to the bad guy.
Yes, that's right. So the author's helping you understand that. What were some questions you guys had? Do fox eat cheese?
I also said, like, who else was around watching it, and then has this happened before? Like, because you can see that the crow was very reluctant at the beginning. So has she fallen for this before, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. And in the scriptures, we have places where we can kind of like pull back in the story to see maybe has this happened before? Is this like I think Abraham lies up or tells a king that Sarah's his sister twice, I think. So that's wonderful to think in that way as it hasn't happened before.
Well, there's another one of these stories with another fox. That's the story of the fox learning the chicken how to.
So there's a similar story. Yeah, good. Yeah, that's right.
I think it's worth asking if we're supposed to be the fox or the crow. Is this story a flattery works, use it, or is this a story
Good. Good,
flattery
good.
works, avoid it, like
Good.
be on the watch that you might be deceived?
Yes. Which leads us to the big question, and that is, what does the author hope? What does the author hope you walk away with those two questions? Am I to be the fox, or should I not be the crow? What do you think?
I think the use of the crow demonstrates that we shouldn't be the crow, right? Because if the fox were just a cunning person, and we should be a cunning person, then I don't think you paint the fox as a deceiver. But the fact that the fox is painted as a deceiver, I think would suggest that he is the bad guy, therefore don't be the crow.
Yes. Yep. That's really interesting. It like that if you just read the story literally and you have no worldview behind you, you're gonna walk away thinking I should fly. But I don't think that's the intended meaning from the author. I think the author wants us to recognize flattery is bad all around. We shouldn't flatter, and we shouldn't be the one who lets our pride swell up. But you gotta have this. It's like an anti-principle in a way, which is kind of really interesting. And you will see those as well in what book in the scriptures, where a statement's given, and okay, wait, any in your mind? There's one specifically in that wisdom literature that I'm thinking of. Where statements are given like they're true, and yet understand the book, we see that.
Ecclesiastes.
Yes, perfect, right? Perfect. That if you were to base your whole lifestyle and your worldview off that book, you would walk out pretty sad. And yes, right? And we look at the scriptures, we look as a whole, and we say, no. Is that in the intended meaning of the author? It might be. But as we look at the holistic picture of the Bible, that's not God's intent for us. And Ecclesiastes even it progresses in an interesting light where he doesn't really end there as much. So again, all that to say, there are times where you will be given a principle in the scriptures, and you just need to ask, how does this look in the context of the whole picture, right? Because if we just accept at face value, we're going to be in trouble, right? Like even in James, we walk through, the balance of faith and works. We have to see it as a big picture. So good. Any other questions you guys had?
Why is the crow a female?
I'm not going there.
Some passages.
That's right. I asked, how is the fox speaking? It's just. Yes. No, we have animals in the Bible that speak, so it's a good question to ask. So. Of course, this one's easy. It's a made-up story, but good. And I asked, why in the world does fox? Why in the world does a fox like cheese? So, sweet. In terms of your outlines, we didn't really hit on this much. So, an outline's purpose is just to go through bullet point, boom, 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 with some small details that explain the main point. So, if this helps, I don't think you guys probably had enough time to get to your outline, but my outline was, and I'll just tell you what it was. My first point was Fox and reader dialogue of Fox's appetite. That was my first outline. the fox and reader's dialogue of the fox's appetite. And then I have A and B of he loves meat and he loves cheese. You are pretty mischievous, too. My second point was intro of story and characters. We have the fox and the crow. And then again, that was an A and B as well. And then my third point was the flattery of the fox. And I wrote down his 3 flatteries. You look lovely. Your feathers are basically your body is wonderful, and I'm sure your voice is amazing. Those are the 3 flatteries. And I had those A, B, C. What's that? Yeah, that's right. That's right. You look lovely. Your body's wonderful, and I bet your voice is great. Yes. Good. Yeah. Mine's pretty close to that. I just have a little more words. Yes. And then I have 4. So if 3 was the flattery of the fox, 4 is the fall of the cheese. And then my A, B under that is falling for the deception, and the fox walks away. And then I debated having a 5th one, which was the principles revealed at the end. Flattery will get you everywhere. But I typically, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Would you ever use different styles of outlining for different types of narrative? Like I have mine on a plot triangle, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion, introduction,
totally
or like
fine.
chiastic structure in Hebrew poetry.
Perfectly fine. Using good old Bible school words, chiastic structure. Yeah, that's fine. The purpose of the outline is to take these things and place it into one coherent spot. So otherwise, if you just sit with observations and questions, and you're just going to be like so scatterbrained. But this allows you to succinctly understand the passage, to begin to start the practice of only including what's super important. Because I'm not including that it's a sunny day in my outline. I'm just not. That needs to be included in the intro of the story. So it's the beginning process to refine the story into a smaller bite-sized chunk. And we have to do it because the next step we're going to do is going to refine our outline even more. So that's why I think the outline is important, because we actually have to go a further step of refining, and the outline starts the process. So however your outline shows up is fantastic. Make sense?
Yeah,
Ethan has a question too.
Yes, Ethan.
when should you answer your questions or seek answers?
Yeah. I try to answer my questions before I move to my outline.
And are you hesitant to move quickly to like a commentary or looking at what other people have studied?
Great question. People will disagree with me here, and I'm totally fine with it. I was talking with a pastor up at Fellowship Greenville the other day, and homeboy spends like 5 hours reading commentaries whatever passage he's teaching. He's a great teacher and faithful to the word. In kind of the heartbeat of the Bible teachers here, we actually tend to avoid using commentaries until I cannot find the answer, and I'm paralyzed and I can't move forward. Because if you get stuck on your questions, you can get stuck and spend way too many hours on them. And so at the point that I really want to find the answers to the questions by my own study, by my own conversations with other people, and looking for myself really before I go to the commentary. Because when I go to the commentary, it kind of like takes away the sweetness of finding the answer, and it becomes his answer, not my answer. But when I do come to the answer, I typically will read a couple commentaries to see if if all the other smart guys are off over there and I'm over here, I need to reconsider my answer. But I use it as a comparison tool, not a revelation tool. Yes.
So I'll take, 12 hours on a verse, to get an answer when I'm going really deep into it. There's some point in there that you probably would have said you're stuck and looked at the commentary.
Yes.
How long does it, on average, will a question take? Like, are you saying 20 minutes of study, throw up your hands, get a commentary, or are you talking 4 hours of study before you get
I guess it does depend on the value of this question. If the question is something about the heart of the passage, I need to have an answer. And so, but this is where it's also helpful. Being proactive in your lesson plan is going to help you here. Because if you're like, I'm just going to start my lesson, and whatever I get today, you'll be stuck on that question for far too long. But if you know, I have, in 2 hours, I need to be here, it's going to encourage you and motivate you to be done, because your next step in the following day is going to be another objective or purpose. So when you proactively plan, I'm going to have my observations, question, and outline done today, and there's no questions about it, you'll get to your question section and say, oh, I only have 30 more minutes to develop my outline, commentary, answer, I like this is good, moving to my outline. And so being proactive of how you're preparing is going to serve you. Does that make sense? Cool. Yes, Josh.
Do you think people will come to incorrect, like a guy who was talking about sticking to the Bible
Yes.
being like the main thing? Do you think like that could have been a question? Why did Jesus spend like,
Yes.
What went into that? Is anything like that could?
I think that's the only question he asked in their world. I can't say it positively, of course, but because he answers that question. Why did Jesus spit in his face? His solution, to give him his DNA. But he didn't read the next 3 verses. Yeah, it's like, he didn't do it well. So, yes, that question is a great question. And that's like the climax of the story. You need to ask that question. But don't let that be the only question you ask. You'll get in trouble. And you'll spit in a friend's face. Yes.
The Bible only gives so much detail, and there's times where questions aren't answered.
Yes.
How do you navigate something like that?
I typically will look at the person I'm teaching and say, I honestly have no idea. Saying I don't know is fine. Yeah.
You can speculate.
Yes, it could be.
Better
And
tell
yes, that's right. We use a couple words to tell the listener we're speculating, and that is my go-to is could it be, or it seems, or I wonder if it's possible. Your words have established that you're not speaking from authority. You're not speaking a truth. You're making sure the listener knows this is your conjecture. So great question. If you can't find an answer to a question, talk to Doug. He has it. So.
I gotta say something about commentary.
Please. Yeah, I would say if you can finish the lesson and then go to a commentary, that is such a home run feeling. Unless the commentary is all saying completely wrong. Yeah, that's an awful feeling.
Yeah.
But there's when I teach on teaching the Bible, I usually put up a chair and say, Jesus, help me, guide me through this. And I feel like sometimes I'm skipping my conversation with Jesus by opening a book. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. It's like I've wrestled with Jesus on some of my lessons.
Yes.
I feel like Jacob, but Lord, we've got to solve this problem. Tell me what the truth is on this.
Yes.
And so there's an abiding in Christ thing that a commentary can factor out.
Yep.
And sometimes you just need to think for a while. What are the possible options?
Yes.
Okay, and where do I lean? So there's some thinking that needs to go in with questions. And it's simple to open a commentary.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree. I try to keep them away, because if I begin to rely on them, I wouldn't really do this stuff. I would just go read the commentary and then jump start
I
it.
have known people who said, our pastor, every time he starts a series, within a lesson or two, a week or two, I figured out which commentaries count, and then I get ahead of them. And I
Well, and I think if you're new to preparing lessons, and you're new to how to formulate, provide, or figure it all out, you're gonna have a ton of questions, and you get really hung up on all of that. You have to keep the goal end in mind. And for children's ministry, it's like, what does this passage say about who God is? And what does it call us to do? Or what does it say about me? How does this relate to Jesus and what he did on the cross? So a little bit more simplistic in that sense, and that can help you go, okay, I'm gonna take that question and put it aside. I need to focus on this rather than spending hours on questions.
Yes.
So,
Yes, and please, both of you guys feel free to interject wherever your thoughts are so valuable, like that one right there too. This method is within the framework of no one above you giving you the objective and the goal, because you should not do this like, Becky asks you to teach a passage with that goal. You should not say, sorry, I'm doing my best. No. You take what she says and you put it at the top, so you're always reminded of the goal of the passage, because they've done this passage before and they know the goal, so don't try to change the target themselves. And she actually, just as the fox gives you the principle in the beginning, in this setting, like in children's ministry or even a junior high, will give the principle to the teacher to teach beforehand. And a lot of times you will be given the principle, which will streamline a lot of your study as well, because you understand the passage. So don't try to reject that. Yes.
I've been staring at a passage for 2 hours. I've got 30 minutes before I need it done. I need to go to a commentary to get some answers. I'm not spending $60 on a commentary. I have no resources. Where do I start when I can't find an answer
Yes.
the night before?
So if I wrote 2 names, I love a guy named Keener and Chuck Swindoll. He's got his Living Insight commentary. Again, I'm so tempted to read these early, but he's so good at making it practical and the truth understandable. And then Keener's a really academic guy that I trust. But this isn't answering your question. These are 2 guys I respect a whole lot. And the NIV has an application commentary that's really helpful too. So those are some stuff if you wanted to spend money, that's fine. Honestly, if I can tell you what I do when I don't want to drop money on a commentary and I have a question, it's kind of crazy, but gotquestions.org is fantastic. And I will put something in there often when I don't understand a specific thing in a passage. And what's even cooler is there was a question I couldn't find, and I sent them the question, and they responded to me within a week and answered the question really well. And so I typically trust them. There's one place I haven't agreed with them with, and I've probably gone to them a couple hundred times so far.
I already misread the
Trust the
sermon.
scholars. Trust the scholars. Oh, you're right. I forgot. Okay, cool. So does this make sense? Great. Keener, Swindoll, and this application. And if you're studying, come in the office and use our stuff. Please use our stuff. I have all the NIV application commentary. Someone gave me when I showed up, and then Swindoll and Keener have some resources from them as well. So don't feel like you can't do it. But gotquestions.org is fantastic, and then Blue Letter Bible is really helpful as well. Blue Letter Bible, I think it's .org, super helpful. So good. All right, now this is where I get excited, is at this point, because there are 3 principles that we've learned at CIU of how to study, and the first is we have to develop 3 statements. But we cannot start with the statements until we have understood their world, okay? Because if we start with the first statement, the third statement's not going to be faithful to the text. The first statement is all about their world. And this is what we call, and after this, we'll do this quickly and then take a break. This is called the content statement. And if I showed you the outline is refining all of this word, idea, question dump, the outline's refining it. The content statement is streamlining it. Like we're focused, we know what we're doing, and we are beginning to build the bridge from their world to our world with this content statement.
And the content statement is nothing but what has happened in the passage. We want to develop a max of a 2-sentence statement that describes the setting, the event, and the response. In 2 sentences. CIU says do it in 1. But I listened to my professors and they would get to the end and then they would say, and thereupon, or whereas, and then they would enter another sentence. It's like, no, you just didn't want to put a period because you were trying to get us to do 1 sentence. So I say a 2-sentence explanation of the setting, event, and response of the story. If it's not clear, if the setting, event, and response is not clear, then you want to capture the narrative. You want to capture the truth being communicated. If you're in the epistle, Paul is communicating to the church of yada, 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 that they should boom, 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 boom. You know, like that's the content of the passage. Now, let's do this with the short story. Develop a sentence that captures these things, that encapsulates the whole story in 1 to 2 sentences. Sound good? Take some time. The hope is that you would include the principle. Drew asked a good question. He said the setting, event, and response does not include the principle, but I would say it does include the principle because it's a part of the event. The principle of the story is a part of the event. So you want to structure the sentence that includes the principle, but according to the passage. You're not using pronouns like me, you, us. You're staying in the characters of the story. So does that make sense? That principle's in there. You just need to find out where it fits in these 3 sections, which I accidentally told people. I'm writing mine on the board. Don't look. That makes me want to look. Already done. Shoot.
Way more than 2 sentences.
I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, are we supposed to be streamlining it? Making a paragraph, right? Yeah. Is it cynical? Oh my goodness.
This is like CIU. I'm like the golden child. I just did that. 1 sentence answer, okay? And I think it encapsulates the story. One morning, setting, a fox desires to take cheese from a crow by flattering her to the point that she opened her mouth, saying to the flattery and lost her cheese. So, what was it you guys had? I'm not saying this is it. You're all wrong. That's not true at all. This is just what I came up with according to my long-winded CIU answers. Great, what was yours? I probably should have asked you your department. I apologize. We have the skeptics over on the corner. Go ahead.
I did a fox smells cheese and finds a crow with cheese in her mouth. It flatters the crow and tricks her getting the cheese.
Great, perfect. That's great. Go ahead, Lauren.
I'd like you to talk to the word
Yeah, that's great. I would just include one morning. Yeah. Flirtatious?
That's what I'm trying to say.
A flatterous?
Like, there's no word.
But yeah, yeah, it could be deceitful because it doesn't seem like people believe it. That's great. That actually, Lauren, is I think better than mine. All right, go ahead. Please. I'm telling you, just read it. The simpler the better. If you can encapsulate the story.
One morning, the fox gets breakfast from the crow through flattery.
Yeah, that's
Because I
great.
thought we weren't doing the whole detailed a bright day.
Yes.
When the fox sees the crow with cheese, he utilizes flattery to trick the crow to come.
Yes. Yep.
No one morning?
No one word.
No setting?
All right, Josh.
Storytelling fox explains how he used flattery to trick the crow into dropping a piece of cheese.
Wow, that's good. All starts with 5 stars.
Yes. 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 Go ahead.
Mine was the fox shares the story of how one morning flattery worked on a crow to steal her cheese.
Perfect. That's great. Yes, that was better than mine. Go ahead.
A fox tells the reader how he used flattery to steal a piece of cheese one morning from Miss Crow and concludes that flattery will get you everything.
Oh, yeah, these are all good. You guys sat in the place and developed a statement that I would say all of you were pretty faithful to the text. Yes, sure.
This is, so, I'm doing a parable. Should my content statement say, Jesus told the Pharisees a story, or should I just say, there was a story of this?
You want parables are tricky to teach. You want to always include in your content statement, Jesus is sharing a parable to the Pharisees about boom, 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 boom. And that your parables content statement are going pretty long. It's too clear for me. So yeah, you want to make sure you have the setting of the parable.
Would it be bad to say, Jesus shares the parable of how the kingdom is like a hidden treasure?
I think who that he shares the parable to is really valuable though.
I guess I'm thinking like in the length. Like,
Yes.
do I need to explain the parable, or can I just say kingdom of God compared to this period?
Shares a parable where a boom, 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 a king gives blah, 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 blah.
So you have to.
Yeah.
It's a sentence that can fully encapsulate the passage.
So you want like a thesis statement.
Basically. What a thesis statement says, this is the goal of the summary. I thought the thesis was a summary. It's more of a summary.
This is the objective.
It's like what you're trying to prove.
Oh, we'll just stick summary. It's a summary of the passage. And this is my thinking. I think in threes too often, so that's how it came out here. I wanted to show the progression of flattery in the story, but my mind's already moving towards the next step, which is not good. So, this is the first step. I would say it is the most important step of the 3 statements that we're going to make. But let's take a what time is it? Let's take a 3-minute break, 3 to 5 minute break. So feel free to use the restroom,
That's 2
grab more
sandwiches.
food. Yeah, we're doing
All right, Ryan, I got some CAU questions. I have been taught that there are 3 worlds. The world behind the text, the world of the text, the world in front of the text.
Typically, the world behind the text often is the world of the text. But there are important things that can be traced back to other worlds as well, right? Like if you're teaching the story of Jesus during Passover in the context of him showing the curse, you also need to to understand the law that was given about Passover at the point. Yeah, I understand the context.
Example might be just between you have the Gospels. Mark leaves out certain details. John goes, should I go to the world out of the text and try and teach my recreation, harmonized gospel, or should I intentionally leave out those details and teach them all?
It depends on what you're selecting to emphasize. If you were doing a harmony of the gospel series, or like Doug did a life of Peter once, was in the context of looking at the harmonies as continuum to show all of them together. But the thing is, when John wrote his gospel, it's like he wrote it while he was reading the other ones, right? So his desire was to emphasize the things that the other authors had not in their stories. And so personally, if you're teaching Mark, I say don't pull in stuff from Matthew, because Matthew has a different purpose. If there's details in there that might serve you, like it's really interesting how in Matthew it says this, but don't like rely on the other gospels. You should look at them. You should look to them to understand the story. But I would not involve them, because you want to teach the intended author. You want to teach the intended meaning of the author.
So what I've heard is my goal should be to teach from the world of the text to the world in front of the text. And only if the world behind the text serves that purpose should I try to bring it out.
Yes, but you should be in the world behind the text in your study. Like that, you shouldn't leave that out. Yes, great question.
Yeah. I'm thinking about First Thessalonians, like how much time do I want to spend talking about this and everything else?
Yes, yes. Good.
Balancing that behind it.
Good.
What things are on the harmony of the gospel?
I mean, just start about.
Well, yeah, you don't want to be a lot of them.
Yeah, it's me too. Pick your favorite.
All right, let's get rolling.
This is good, right? Please.
One minute. We're not going to both meet again.
Well, if we, let's hurry for time. I can cut it down. Yes, that's it.
That's awesome.
You like when I hit you? I can hit you a lot harder.
All right.
But not verbally. With my arm.
Cool. All right. So we have, this is the cool thing. We have, according to that, I probably would have written one of your guys' sentences up here. But according to our content statements, we have, I think we can look at the story and say we have faithfully understood their world, right? And we spend an hour really doing it, which is good. I think that's a fantastic time number for the time that we have. We're probably going to spend about half more time in their world of planning this quasi lesson based off of a Joker story. So now, because we understand their world, we are on the same page based off our own study, observations, questions, outline. We now, our goal, remember, our goal is our world, but we cannot get to our world yet based off of their world. We need to develop what we would be taught to you as a timeless principle. A timeless principle is the bridge from their world to our world. That's how we're going to get there. And all the timeless principle is, And it's just really simple, and it's always been really helpful for me. And this is why it really matters you do a great content statement. Because all the timeless principle is you taking the content statement and removing all of the time-bound elements of the content statement. So that you are left with a principle that is true regardless of time. Past, present, future until Jesus returns. Okay? I can already anticipate Drew saying, well, is this principle true after the white throne judgment? And there can't be flattery at the white throne judgment after it. And then, okay, until Jesus returns. It's a timeless principle, which is oxymoron. So here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna take your sentence, not this sentence. We are gonna take your sentence, and you're going to take out all the time-bound elements. Let's just look at mine to remove what's time-bound. What's time-bound here? Yes. Yes.
What? There could be a time in the future when there's no more cheese.
Huh?
All the cows could die. You gotta take cheese out.
Cheese, cows.
Crow, cheese.
Can you take out like the herd and the sheep?
Yeah, I mean, technically. And I'm not saying do like cross things out of your content statement. But what I'm trying to do here is show you, we're gonna need to rewrite this statement. And we need to take all of the she's and hers out. And we're gonna need to principalize these things in a timeless way. Now I don't know, does this sound, I'm trying to decide, do you want to do this by yourself and then we can kind of work through it together? Okay, cool, good. So you're going to communicate the content statement in a timeless way without the names and the times and whatnot. And I know it seems hard because I haven't given you one, but just give it a shot. I'll tell you this, it's hard starting this statement. And so in the scriptures, my start is typically God desires. Is how I start the scripture for my timeless statement. But here, the way I started was no matter the day. So then that got everything rolling to communicate the rest of this thing. And now remember, what's the main ideas of the content statement? If you could just summarize it for the rest of us. Sure. What's the main ideas? Like, what's kind of the stuff we want to focus in on with our content statement, our timeless principle?
Someone desiring something, using flattery to obtain.
Yes, good.
So you would, like a couple of us have like the fact that it's a fox telling the story to us. Would you just ask that?
Yep. This is where you see, does that matter in a timeless way? Maybe it does sometimes, but not in this. I would make the case not here. So go ahead and give it a minute, and then we'll flesh it out together. All right, give it a go. What did you guys say?
I had a really short content statement. So my timeless principle is flattery works to steal.
Works to steal. Okay.
I don't like it.
Works to steal. Okay. What you need to do there is to do the work in your mind to say, is that true all the time? Yes. Go ahead.
Prideful often succumb to flattery and
Wonderful. That's fantastic. That's so good. Yes. I can see that. What else you got?
I said flattery can be used to manipulate others to do what you want.
Good,
When a person uses flattery, things will be stolen and people will be deceived.
good. That was close to one. Was that everyone?
Flattery can be used to trade and take from others if you aren't careful of it.
Good. I said, no matter the day, there will be those who desire to steal, and take advantage of others using flattery. But then I had but it only leads to loss and inflated pride. That's how I finished it. So mine's still, yes.
Yeah. Is it to take point?
It's a timeless principle.
Because I was wrestling with like the conclusion that he makes, like he makes his conclusion. So you had that as inflated pride.
Inflated pride.
Okay.
Yeah, that was mine.
Because I was thinking of how to put his conclusion.
You could, honestly, this isn't necessary. There will be those who desire to steal and take advantage of others using flattery, but it leads to loss and inflation. Yes.
In this story, it led to a happy fox.
Yeah, that's what
It
it
didn't lead to loss and, led to loss and inflated pride only of one person.
It led to loss for one and inflated pride of the other.
Yes, and you can see my worldview here is shooting into the story. But I think the intended purpose of the author is to discourage it, not encourage it. And so my timeless principle isn't going to encourage what the author, I believe, sought to discourage.
Let me reword my question. Can I add stuff to my timeless principle? Because inflated pride is not in your content statement. That got added along the way. Can I, it's totally fine to me. I was just assuming that I couldn't do that.
I make the case same to the flyer.
Do you think the author is talking to the flatterer or to the flatterer?
I
I
think,
think he's talking to the potential flatterers.
yes. I think so too.
His point is to them.
Yeah.
Be wise and avoid and don't fall.
Yeah.
And you won't suffer loss.
Yes. And again, we're at the nitty gritty of this, but I'd make the case same to the flatteries who are like, oh, I am this good. I'm gonna sing too. But I'm not saying this is the 100% correct answer. I liked all of your guys' answer, and I think they're very good according to the process. Yes.
Is this the one, the statement where you
No,
don't want to
no.
put you in it?
Yeah, you don't want to put you here, or us, or we, or anything. That's for the next one, yeah. So. Yeah, I think when you read the story, you personally get the sense of the pride of the bird by how it describes how she sings. And so that's why I tried to do this. You saw how I was already moving here as I was developing this principle. I was developing steps in the principle. And loss, reveal here. Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but so. But this is more difficult. This is not more difficult than I anticipated, but this is hard to do with a child's story. So please hear that. Yes.
So the timeless principle is basically like the moral of the story.
Yes. Yeah. Good. Perfect. That's exactly what it is.
So when prideful person meets flatterer, I like that you said that crow has pride.
Yes.
And that was a relevant point from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would have seen that in my observations too. I would have made that as an observation, and I did on my observations. So. And this is what Bill was saying. There would be 100 people teaching this with 100 different ways. 40 will be wrong. 40 will be all different, but still kind of with the main heartbeat in a way. So I think you guys had we have all communicated the main heart and principle of it with details that some of us are including, maybe some of us are including because our own story connects here. It just came alive for us and it just fits in our timeless principle. And we'll move into the next one. So any other questions here? Does this make sense? You're taking out all the time-bound elements. And you're right, I would have removed this sentence. But sweet. Now this is typically with Drew. What Drew will hear a lot this summer is what's your timeless principle, and then my next statement will be what's your response principle. And so then when we show up in our world with the response principle. Response statement, principle, whatever you want to call it. And I get upset at myself when I step into a lesson and I cannot share the timeless principle very well, or I can't share the response principle very well. I want it to be like ingrained in me, where someone can ask me, "Hey, what do you hope they know or do here?" And I would simply state my response statement, and I jump the gun and explain the response statement. But this is the heart of this is the moral. This is the heart of the text. And now, what the response statement does is, if the timeless principle is our bridge into our world, we are now placing time-bound elements back into our statement. But we are placing the time-bound elements are the listener, the people we're teaching to. And so we've taken this process to pull out the principle, and now we're really focusing on how does this principle affect a change, cause tension in the life of my listener. And when you do a response statement, your two goals is this: what do I want the listener to know? And what do I want the listener to do in light of the timeless principle, which was sourced in the content, which was found in the content statement. Yeah, no one do. Yeah. What do you want to? I hear you say that a lot too. What do you want to know? What do you want them to do? Yes, sometimes you can just have it on the no. Sometimes you can. What was your question?
Do you want to do both? Or you just
I anticipated it. What Drew's asking is, do I have to do a do? Can I just do a no? And I think it is possible to just have a no. But it better just be about God. Here's what I want you to know about God. And you better work your tail off to make that come alive. But it does feel weird for there not to be a do after what we know. But I've seen people that have just showed up with like McQuilkin. McQuilkin, he was one of the presidents at CAU. And he showed up one chapel and just wanted to talk about the sovereignty of God and didn't mention us. He did in relation to how it applied to us, but not what I should do in light of it. I walked away so encouraged to understand what that meant. And so I think the general principles have these two, but there are times we can have one. Would you disagree or change any of that?
Now, this week when I wake up, I start my time and I praise the Lord. This ought to be this ought to be a reflection time to the Lord. I'm hesitant to think Scripture is just a thinking exercise.
Yeah.
It makes me
Squirm a little bit.
Yes.
Yes. And I get that. And so I think what Bill's saying is, if you don't have a do, make sure it's praise and thanking the Lord the next day or something.
That is the
Yes, that is true. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
I think this is a big thing between like age differences, especially for children's ministry. For preschool, it's focusing on the notes because you're giving the first knowledge of whatever you're giving them. And like elementary, it can kind of have that application. So I feel like this is like, depending on what you're
scriptures say, the scriptures do say be doers of the word.
Right.
And so if I don't want to do the work to help them be doers of the word, then I'm in the wrong here. And I do think the word almost always gives us a place to be doers of the word. But that's what I'm saying. The only place that I personally would keep away and do is when I want to speak to something about God so that we stir our affection and our love for him. But I do not, I might do that 3% of the time, 3 to 5%, yeah.
What about the flip? What if I didn't spend time on the no and just like maybe I only spend time on the no and as far as how to accomplish a duty, but no real truths, nothing really timeless. Just hey, let's learn how to share the gospel. Here's the method.
But I think it's helpful to have a no in here. Here's what I wanted to know. The gospel changes lives. Here's how I want them to go about doing that. Boom.
You would even in training try and attach like a teaching.
Listen, if as you are in the beginning of this process, just don't develop the practice of trying to only do one. You're not going to serve yourself. Just for the next 100 lessons you do, always have a no and a two. And after 100 lessons, come back to me and ask if you can take away one of them, and we'll have a conversation. Just that.
Saying, you know, if you talk about what you said, like, you don't want to be the boss, you don't want to be the crowd, so
Yeah.
would you have like a response?
Great.
One could be about pride, one could be about desire. No, I don't know.
And this is where it's great. The response statement is you looking at your people saying, what do they need? And I think if there's two principles, don't be the fox, but the main one is don't be the crow. I think that's what we can say. I lean towards the focus of don't be the crow. But I might give 5 minutes to say, some of you guys are being a fox and you need to stop as well. But if my group, I really don't see flattery, I might just focus on the crow. I know the crow is the main idea, and so I want to focus on that. But I'm not opposed to involving both. So let's take 2 to 5 minutes to develop a response statement. When I'm in the scriptures, I typically will say my starting line will be, my hope is that according to the passage, the listener would blank all the way through, or something about the listener, because it helps me start. My hope is that my desires of the listener would, and then write the content statement. Otherwise, it's kind of tough, at least for me, to figure out how to develop the response statement without the audience in the beginning. Does that make sense? State your audience in the beginning. What did you guys write?
Middle school students would learn the harm of flattery and remove flattery from their life.
Good, that's fantastic. Totally.
By the end of my lesson, the audience will know the danger of flattery and rightly discern between it and compliments by studying the fox and the crow.
Great again.
By the end of my lesson, the audience will know the dangers of flattery and rightly discern between it and compliments by studying the fox and the crow.
Cool. So you want to involve, if I just focus on flattery, people are going to freeze up on how to encourage someone. So I want to involve that.
I didn't want my do to be in the negative.
Yeah, I respect that. I do think sometimes the scriptures leave us in the negative. They don't give the positive, but I do understand wanting to bring in the positive as well as the negative. So I think that's great. Go ahead, Jeff.
If you aren't careful and mindful of flattery, you could have things taken.
If you are careful and mindful of flattery, you will have things taken from you. Yeah. I think that's a good statement.
You know that flattery is deceiving and that we should fall into the lies of it.
Good. Good.
I hope that my listener will understand that confidence flattery and no competition.
Good. Yeah. Wonderful.
My hope is that you will recognize those who flatter you and get what they want, and then instead of being flattered, you will reject their flattery.
Okay. Cool. And of course, some of your statements will need explaining, right? But that's the purpose of everything you're going to be saying in the lesson, right? Well, we have not even started on our lesson plan yet at all. We have finished our study, right? That was all that work to finish the study. And it takes a lot of time, but often it takes a lot of time because it takes time to go from their world to our world faithfully.
Are you comfortable with the response statement being two statements?
No and do? Yes, mine was.
But the listener would know that prideful people are susceptible to flatterers and can suffer loss.
Yes.
And then the listener would recognize pride in their life and avoid the schemes of the flatterer.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's great. And that know and do does provide two separate statements. I have the same thing. I use see instead of know, but that from the text, the listener would see that flattery, I didn't put a flattery.
Flatter hurts.
Flattery hurts, not helps. And so that's my first one. But also from the text that the listener would stop their attempts at flattery or their pride swelling when it comes. Yes.
Two questions. One, what's the relationship between the response principle and a sticky statement?
Yes. Sticky statement is a method. It's how you're going to communicate your response statement in a way that's going to you can see hearts, you can see hints of a sticky statement.
Yeah.
Flattery hurts, not helps. That's a sticky statement. But
And then your response statement, since it has a no and a do, it has two ideas. I know it's real popular nowadays to have one big idea. Are you saying throw that out the window and don't have one big idea?
what I'm saying is have what reveals itself in the text reveal itself in your teaching.
One big idea is your time is spent.
Yes. But
You got so frazzled.
yes. Back in the day, pastors just sat with 3-point sermon. You never go above, you never go under. And I think it hurts them. Because what if there's only 1 point? Then typically what they do, they take the 1 point and give you 3 ways to do it or 3 ways to stop it, which I'm not that opposed, but I want them to champion the 1 point. So when it comes to 2 things, I don't think that's bad at all to focus on. I focused on 2 things, what they need to know and what they need to do. And in my do, I gave them 2 other things we need to focus on and do, right? Stop their flattery and don't allow their pride to swell when it comes. So technically I have what, 1, 2, 3 principles developed based off of the text.
Little 3-point sermon.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't make any attempt then to have one idea per sermon. You would, whatever the text has. If it has 12, you'd have 12. Or would you prioritize one?
I try to reflect. I try try to have my points reflect the teaching points. However, there's sometimes I need to only select and emphasize one of them. I select and emphasize one. So there's a time for it. There's a time not for it. If I could wave a magic wand, I would reflect perfectly, but time stops me from reflecting perfectly. So I can't, if I'm teaching the 10 Commandments, there's a way I can teach them all, but if I want to do it super well, I need to like one at a time hit them, so there's a place for it as you study. So yes.
I think the no comes out with like the entirety of the teaching, and then the do is like that last like part. So I feel like when we're looking at it like this, it's like very back to back. When you actually teach it, it's going to be an explanation of the no and what they need to know, and then the do is that final conclusion that gets it. Like I think back to your when we were talking about the lesson with all of the stacks of paper of our sin and everything like that. You were talking about like all of our sin and all of the like Bible verses that go into that and everything like that, and then at the end you just knocked out 10% and explained why that happens, and that was like the thing to that's like what we're talking about. So I feel like your no is like the general broad idea of the teaching, and the do is like you're asking them.
Yeah, and I definitely hear what you're saying, and it does come away often that my no is I hope they get it as I teach, but then my do I'm emphasizing. But a lot of times we need to tell them, here's what you need to know, because you're thinking this way. So a lot of times our language needs to move in the direction of being just as direct as we are with what they should do. Because often people are thinking incorrectly and people are behaving incorrectly. And we'll say, hey, stop behaving that way, but we also need to champion them to think differently as well. So I do agree with you. There are times where just off my teaching, I hope people know that we had a mountain of debt against our shoulders and Jesus pushed it aside, right? And so the do came later with that passage, as I said, and you should push your other people's debt aside that you have against others because he did it for you. So yeah. But do you get that? I think we should emphasize the no just as much as the do.
I'm your verbiage and your teaching. He's like, and here's what you need to know. Like, and that's how you know we're in the last 15 minutes. Like, it's like, here's what you need to know.
That's right.
I'll be like 15 minutes left, Ryan, just come. No, but like at the end, I know I zoned out on entire lesson or whatever. Never. You have here's what you need to know, and here's what's on.
Yes.
Listen, we all have our days.
Oh,
I'm not
you're
saying
good.
that I do
You're
that
good.
every time.
And there's two ways. I'm not bothered by that whatsoever. And it usually works out that way. And there's one way I think I'm strong in teaching and one I've been trying to grow in. And that is you typically have this idea, they taught us in the Bible teaching program to teach the passage, develop the principle, the Thomas principle, share the response, know and do. And I got pretty competent at that. And then I came to CFC and watched Doug teach. He does not do that. He like moves through the passage. Here's what you should know and do. Keeps going through. Here's what you should know and do. Keeps going through. Here's what you should know and do. And then he wraps it up into this neat, nice package that of like this one movement we need to make at the end. And so he changes it up and does not follow the outline nice format that we were taught at CNU. And I'm trying to learn that approach as well. And so you're right. My leaning is in the last 15 to 20 minutes. We're like hitting our world. But there is value when you can hit our world as you teach through. But you cannot do that unless you have built this in the beginning, right? And we'll talk about all that in the weeks to come. Lesson planning, methods, and tone and energy curve, all of those are coming in the coming weeks. But we wanted to just go ahead and jumpstart you on your prep because we're finished up. Because at this point, you're able to ask an important question, and that is, how do I want to communicate this? How do I want to teach this? And then you begin to think, you build jumpstart. Because because often when we don't have this, you'll sit down at your computer and you'll start typing your intro, and then you'll just stream of consciousness type out what you want to teach. But when you have the point, when you have the heart, everything you do in your lesson planning revolves around if it accomplishes this, right? And so you might have something, you might plan to do something, and you write out a paragraph in your lesson plan of I'm going to do this and this, but you always need to come back and ask the question, does it help this become more alive to the listener? And if it doesn't, scratch it. You don't have the minutes for it. But if you don't have the main idea as you're lesson prepping, it'll be this scatterbrain type lesson plan where no one really knows what's going on. You just go to this truth, this truth, this truth, this truth. And the response statement and the timeless principle give you laser focus on moving through a lesson plan. And we hope, and this is where we'll talk on in the coming weeks, our hope is that you teach this response statement according to the passage. Okay, because it'd be sad if you got to this text of the children's story and you never read the text, worked through the text. You just like try to communicate this from your own story, your own life. They're getting the principle, but they are not knowing the text. And that was a problem for me. That was a problem for me as I was student teaching. My academic advisor walked in, and she watched me 4 hours one day teach in a private school. And she said, Ryan, they know the principles of the Bible, but they do not know where they came from. They will not remember where they came from. And that was so challenging for me. But I want them not just to know the principles, but I want them to know the stories that the principles come from, right? That when someone thinks back to don't red carpet your righteousness, they'll know exactly where that came from in the book of Matthew. Not exactly, but they'll know where in that place. And so that's always a goal of mine personally. But this is kind of the groundwork of lesson prepping, at least that we do from kind of the CIU format. There's other ways of doing it, which is fine. We might talk about this. But any other thoughts, words? Good stuff. Cool. Next we will do we'll do a 2-part on leadership, and then I think you have crosswalk, and then we'll come back and start nailing methods. Which methods are, or we'll do methods are developing a lesson plan, and methods are just how am I going to communicate the principle, story, board work, all this types of stuff. So we'll practice with that. So sound good? Any questions, thoughts? Cool. So I have homework for you guys that you'll be doing before our next meeting.
They already have one.
Do they? Well, this is good. All right. You are going to, do you want to do it by next week? I won't be here next week, though. You can manage it if you want to, or okay, next time I'm teaching, you guys will, and this is easy, Mark 4:35 through 41. Mark 4:35 through 41, and I want you to bring all 3 principles to that. Mark 4:35 through 41. Come with your content, your timeless, and your response statement, which means you probably need to do some work in the realm of observations, questions, and outcomes. But yes.
Could you do a different passage?
Oh, you shut your mouth.
It's only 6 verses. It's just great.
I'm going through the card.
I'll think about it.
Can you do the rest of it?
Yeah, you're gonna start finding some Vaseline in some uncomfortable places. Talking about my car, he said my car.
Thanks for
Context, Drew.
paying attention and being respectful. I appreciate it. I hope it's helpful for you. And appreciate it, my friend.
Oh. I heard the first person.
David.